One thing I see online, especially on Reddit, is people asking the same question after a car accident. And it's, okay, so now what? And honestly, yeah, I get why most people ask that. Most of us spend years driving, never thinking about what we'd do if we got into an accident. And then something happens, and suddenly you're getting advice from everybody. Friends tell you one thing, family tells you another, insurance starts calling. And you search Google and maybe start looking up things like car accident lawyer or accident attorney near me because you're just trying to understand what people usually do in these situations. And you end up reading Reddit threads from 5 years ago. I feel that. And before you know it, you've got 10 different answers and no idea which one actually applies to your situation. And that's why I want to talk about a few things that come up over and over again when people start looking for information after an accident. One thing I see people asking all the time is what they should have done right after the accident happened. And honestly, most people aren't thinking clearly in that moment. You're checking if everybody's okay. You're looking at your car, or maybe you're trying to move out of literal traffic, and maybe you're still trying to process what even just happened. The last thing most people are thinking about is documentation. But later on, that's usually what people wish they had done more of in that moment. And that's why you'll hear people recommend taking photos, saving contact information, writing down what happened, and keeping track of anything that seems important. Even small details can matter because what feels obvious today might not feel so obvious a week later. The goal isn't to do anything complicated, it's really just about keeping good information while everything is still fresh. One thing that seems to stress people out almost immediately is insurance. And honestly, I think it's because most people don't deal with accident claims very often. For some people, this might be their first accident ever. And when the phone starts ringing and people start asking questions, it can feel like a lot at once. I see people online asking things like, should I answer this call? Should I send photos? Why are they asking me this? And most of the time, the confusion isn't because the questions are difficult. It's because people don't know what's normal. They don't know what the process usually looks like. That's why so many people end up spending hours online trying to compare their situation to what other people experienced. They start searching Google, reading Reddit threads, watching YouTube videos, sometimes looking up things like car accident lawyer just to understand what options people usually consider after an accident. Most people aren't trying to make a big decision right away. They're just trying to figure out what's happening and whether they're missing something important. The funny thing is that after an accident, suddenly become researchers. They start searching everything, Google, YouTube, Reddit, Facebook groups, anywhere. They think they can find some answers. And when you look at the questions people are asking, they're usually very similar. Things like, should I contact a car accident lawyer? How long does insurance take? Has anyone else dealt with this before? What happens next? Most people aren't looking for some big legal strategy, they're looking for reassurance. They want to know whether what they're experiencing is normal. They want to hear from people who have been through something similar. That's one reason Reddit gets mentioned so often. People like hearing real experiences from real people. One thing I've noticed is that people don't really want complicated explanations. They want clear information. They want somebody to explain things in a way that actually makes sense, not a bunch of legal terms that nobody uses in real life. A lot of people are simply trying to understand the basics. Who am I talking to? What happens next? How does this process usually work? What questions should I be asking? Sometimes the best information isn't necessarily the most detailed. Sometimes it's the information that's easiest to understand. Because when you're already stressed, the last thing you want is more confusion. While looking into this topic, one resource that kept coming up was findmyattorneys-colorado.com. And honestly, I can understand why people look for resources like that. After an accident, people don't always know where to start. They don't necessarily need every answer immediately. They just want a place where they can learn a little bit more about the process and figure out what questions they should be asking. Sometimes having a starting point makes a huge difference. Not because it solves everything, but because it helps people feel less overwhelmed by everything that's happening. At some point, a lot of people decide they'd rather talk to a real person than read another article. And honestly, I really get that. You can only read so many Reddit threads before you start wanting an actual present conversation. And that's one reason people call hotlines. Not necessarily because they've already made a decision, but because they have questions. People ask things like, what states are available? Is someone available 24 hours a day? How does the process generally work? What should I be paying attention to? If you want to ask those kind of questions, you can call 800-276-9007. Sometimes a short conversation is enough to help people better understand what they're dealing with. If there's one thing I've noticed from reading all these discussions online, it's that most people think they need to figure everything out immediately, and that's usually not realistic. Most people have questions. Most people feel confused at first, and most people spend time trying to understand what's happening fully, and that's normal. The important thing is getting good information and taking things one step at a time. You don't have to solve everything today. You don't need every answer right away. Sometimes just understanding the next step is enough. And honestly, that's how most people get through situations like this. If you want to learn more, visit findmyattorneys-colorado.com or call 800-276-9007 just to learn more about the process and get answers to some of the questions you may have. Not a law firm or legal advice.